We betrayed the public. We broke their trust. And we had been riding on a reputation of excellence for years. And now we were quickly shutting down one side of the debate.
Disrupted America that I fought.
Weird thing to happen. This is an interesting article that came out of National Post, and it was written by this guy, Leslie Roberts. And if you're wondering why that name sounds familiar, well, according to Wikipedia here, Leslie Roberts is a Canadian television radio personality who was most recently the host of CTV Morning Live. He also hosted the radio show Leslie Roberts Show, 9 a.m. to noon on News Talk 580 in Ottawa. And in June 2022, he told his audience he was leaving CTV and CFRA, thanking Ottawa viewers and listeners for his 3 great years in the capital. He had also previously worked as host of the Leslie Roberts Show in Montreal and was anchor and senior editor of Global Toronto. So this guy is a very well-known journalist within the television here in Canada. He's a very well-known journalist. And it's amazing that a journalist is calling out the CBC for lack of journalism. Talk about biting the hand that feeds you. Even though Leslie Roberts hasn't worked with the CBC, but I'm just saying that's, for many people, that's cutting off your access. So it says, Leslie Roberts, CBC has eroded trust in journalism. It must be reformed. The CBC needs a hard reset. It must get out of the pundit business and back into the business of reporting. So goes on to say the CBC didn't become broken overnight. For decades, concerns were quietly raised about bias, lack of viewpoint, diversity, and leadership more focused on an agenda than journalism. But this week's very public resignation of Travis, how do you say that? Donraj changed that. Not because it was shocking, but because it confirmed what so many already knew. Hiring practices, internal politics, and a growing editorial slant weren't ones off. They were systematic. I have heard rumblings of anchors questioning producers and writers about choice of guests and slanted scripts. Those arguments were never won by those who raised questions. Travis took one for the team of journalists in all news outlets who reflect the values of seeking truth, holding power to account, and bringing in crucial thinkers for balance. The CBC can no longer afford to act like it is untouchable. When you're funded by the public to the tune of over $1 billion a year, you owe Canadians a full fulfilled mandate, true journalism. And right now, that's not what Canadians are getting. Inside the CBC, it appears dissent is discouraged. Editorial framing too often leans one way, a hard left slant. This isn't public service, it's narrative management. Even though more and more of the public seem to be leaning towards broadcasters and publications that echo their politics, that is not the role of the national broadcaster, and that's the problem. The result, public trust is eroding, and then the trust in the national broadcaster flatters, it drags confidence in journalism down with it. There is a time when the CBC didn't have to prove itself. It was the national broadcasters with unmatched reach, funding, and influence, but along with those advantages came something else, an attitude. An observer who looked for private broadcasters over the 40 years, I've watched the evolution of CBC privilege firsthand. It went from dominating news events with teams and resources often doubled what the rest of us had to expecting to go first when questioning newsmakers. And then those of us with a microphone and single camera dared to go first in scrums. We were met with stares and attitude as if we crossed some unwritten line. The CBC acted as if it owned the right to shape the national conversation. I knew that eventually this would not end well. And here we are after all that. Arrogance and entitlement always ended badly. But this isn't just a life lesson, it's a crossroads for journalism. We must win back public trust, now eroded by events unfolding at CBC. The CBC needs a hard reset. That means doing less and doing it better. It means getting out the pundit business and back into the business of reporting. Focus on news, local, regional, investigative, the kind of journalism private outlets are struggling to fund, but Canadians still rely on. It also means hiring based on merits, not ideology. Bring in people who can ask tough questions, chase hard facts, and challenge power, that not those selected to mirror a particular worldview. To be clear, there are still smart, principled journalists inside the CBC, but they're working within a system that's biased and disconnected from the very people it's meant to serve. Canadians don't want to be managed. They want to be informed. They want facts to let them decide. If the CBC wants to be relevant again, it needs to return to its mission. Strip it down to news and do that better than anyone else. This isn't just about saving a broadcaster. It's about restoring public faith in all people we rely on to tell the truth. And it must be done with a clear mandate to get it done, to get it right, and soon, say 2 years. Mark Carney government should put the CBC on notice, reform it, or loose it, effective immediately. The $1 billion subsidy should go on the chopping block. Well, he's wrong about the end there. That Mark Carney's going to do something about, because Mark Carney effectively is the one that's forwarding the billions of dollars funding the CBC. And he's not going to change it. He's not going to do anything about it. But Leslie Roberts definitely right about the substance, or the lack of substance, within CBC. And, I wish I had that clip. I wish I had the clip where Justin Trudeau bragged about how bailing out the media would cover up his scandals, how broadcasters, if they got these subsidies from the government, they wouldn't be reporting on the government because they're not going to bite the hand that feeds them. So that really says a lot. That really says a lot about just the essence of what the CBC has become. And yes, at one point, the CBC was a reputable source. You look at the days where, Peter Mansbridge was the head anchor for its for the National, and it was widely regarded as a source of information. It was widely regarded as the pinnacle of Canadian journalism. That has now deteriorated. That is now gone. And people have been saying that it's been going since Donald Trump got elected. Some may even say beforehand. There's arguments to be made about when exactly the CBC lost its edge. But we know for a fact that the so-called public broadcaster that's getting our tax dollars is not serving us. It's no longer a public broadcaster. I say that when CBC declares themselves as a public broadcaster, you got to use that term loosely. The same way that PBS declares itself a public broadcaster, even though it gets subsidies from Bill Gates. And they wonder why PBS, a public broadcaster, is siphoning out and spewing out medical misinformation that Bill Gates has told you. They wonder why that is. So here's also something to bring up to that. This is from the Canadian Taxpayer Federation. They say 6-figure salaries are soaring at the CBC. According to Franco Terrazzano, who's the head of the Taxpayer Federation. He's a good resource. And in the highlight section here, just in the purple there, it says the number of CBC employees receiving an annual salary of more than $100,000 has increased every year since 2015, according to the records. $100,000. Think about that. Think about that. The employees at CBC, and they're not talking about the bottom line employees, by the way. They're not talking about, the janitors or the cameramen or the PA ops. They're talking about the CEOs. They're talking about the people that fork in a bunch of money from the government, your tax dollars, crying about how the CBC needs saving, how we need to support Canadian media. They get all this funding and it goes right to the CEOs, and then they go and make lavish purchases. Remember the last CEO, Catherine Tate, went and bought a penthouse for herself for the Olympics. That's really helping the broadcaster. That's really helping the integrity of Canada. That's really helping the essence of Canadian media. That you're buying a penthouse for yourself using taxpayer money, claiming that you're saving the network. And it also says the number of CBC staffers with a six-figure salary increased 17% over the last year. Since 2015, that number has increased 318%. So they have all this money, and yet not a lot of viewers. Not a lot of viewers. Not a lot of incentive to actually do journalism. It's amazing that someone like me, with a shoestring budget podcast, doing it in his basement, has more integrity to journalism than the multi-millionaires working at CBC. Isn't that kind of interesting? They have the resources, they have the luxury, but somehow I have more incentive to actually inform people. Go figure. So you might remember this moment a while back, and this is brought to you by Blender News, who brought this up. So remember the national coalition for the vaccine injured, the coalition, the investigative group that was involved in where all the lies were being told during the pandemic. So this from a former CBC journalist. We betrayed the public in the regards to COVID. We were in fact pushing propaganda. Those who questioned and challenged the narrative were portrayed as dangerous and spreading disinformation. So Canadian taxpayers were paying a network, paying the public broadcaster to misinform them, because while the CBC was continuing to get tax dollars from the general public, they were also getting incentives from the pharmaceutical industry. Again, that's why I say the CBC and their public title is very loose. It's not a public broadcaster. It's, if anything, it's become a propagandist tool of government and corporation. And here's just the proof of it. When that journalist spoke out at this NCI event.
We betrayed the public. We broke their trust. And we had been riding on a reputation of excellence for years. And now we were quickly shutting down one side of the debate. And how were we doing that? We branded the doctors and the experts the CBC chose that we used in our stories. We branded them as competent and trustworthy. And those who questioned and challenged the narrative were portrayed as dangerous and spreading disinformation. And that was regardless of what their specialty was, what their background was, and what their experience was. And I just...
Yeah, regardless if they were actually qualified doctors who may have cured people or studied this virus or know a thing or two about the vaccine, the technology, the ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, monoclonals. Regardless if they were actually informative or not, we deemed them misinformed. We deemed them misinformation. We deemed them not allowed to be take part in the discussion on media. But we'll allow Theresa Tam and Bonnie Henry, who are now getting the Order of Canada for their mishandling of COVID. Go figure. Go figure.
I just also want to sort of give you a window into how this affected me personally. As a veteran journalist, I had solid contacts in the community. I had people calling me with stories. So I was seeing and I was hearing and I was absorbing all their stories of suffering and pain, and they were sharing them with me, and these stories weren't being told. Some of those were from the vaccine injured. Some were from people who had lost their job because of their vaccination status. Those whose families had been blown apart and they'd been ostracized. University students who were depressed over repeated lockdowns and mandates, and parents who were calling me that were agonizing on whether they should vaccinate their child or not. So all these stories were sitting inside of me. They were left with me, and I felt the crushing burden and the weight of their truth not being given a voice. And it affected my well-being because these people trusted me, and I felt I had failed them and I had let them down. It was like I had failed these people as a journalist to give voice to their truth. So I had witnessed in a very short time the collapse of journalism, news gathering, investigative reporting, and the way I saw it is that we were in fact pushing propaganda. And to define propaganda, it's information, ideas, opinions, or images that give one part of an argument, which are broadcast, published, in order to influence the person's opinion. And mental health workers have their own definition of propaganda as manipulative persuasion in the service of an agenda.
The Canadian government has monopoly on media in this country. Please follow us to help balance the scales.
There you go. That was from a former CBC journalist even revealing that. So you have a top broadcaster from other networks exposing CBC. You have former employees at CBC. And it's not even just the journalism aspect. It's not just CBC News that is a part with this, but a lot of the programs. Famous, well-known comedian, the host of 22 Minutes, Kathy Jones, was fired. She was fired for revealing information, for actually having the audacity to not be propagandized, to not smear and go one direction. And she got attacked. She got villainized. She got thrown off under the bus by her fellow co-hosts at the 22 Minutes. And she has been spoken out. She's been vocal about the CBC and their one-sided arguments. So, obviously, this broadcaster's gone very, very much downhill. It's very apparent to people, unless you're one of the very few people that still watch the network, primarily for the 55 and older crowd, because I don't know any young person, at least in my circles, at least in my demographic, that bother to watch CBC, even their news programming. Just how falling apart it is. And it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing because back in the day, like I said, CBC was once a reputable source. We used to mock the American media. We looked at MSNBC, CNN, and Fox News parroting propaganda to Americans and looked at that and go, holy crap, that's hilarious. Thank God it's not happening here. Well, guess what? We're doing it. We're doing it. And it's happening all across the world. It's happening all across the world, which goes to show you how much power and influence outsider entities have when it comes to control of media, when it comes to control of narratives, when it comes to control of food, when it comes to control of medicine, when it comes to control of anything. So, like I said, I don't consider the CBC a public broadcaster. I use that term loosely because even though it does get tax dollars from us to flourish the CEOs that are getting $100,000 annual bonuses, it's not actually serving the public. It's not serving the public. It's serving the interests of their advertisers, serving the interests of the government. It's serving the interests of the corrupted individuals that occupy these media platforms. And it's embarrassing that they're getting this lucrative amount of money, begging and pleading with people that they need more money because they need to save the broadcaster. But yet someone like me, who's doing a shoestring budget podcast like this, is able to better inform you on situations. It better to tell you the truth about Ukraine or the corruption with Justin Trudeau or the corruption with Mark Carney, to tell you the truth about Israel and Hamas, to tell you the truth about foreign affairs. I don't have the luxuries. I don't have the $100,000 bonuses to pay for the luxuries of big giant broadcasts. But somehow I'm able to do this myself and they can't. Which goes to show you what a disaster these broadcasters are becoming and why ultimately more and more people are coming to places like this. More and more people are coming to places like me to get information than them. And that scares the bejesus out of them. Hence why they are putting legislation down to get people back into line, that they don't want certain narratives to come out on social media. Hence why Bill C-11, Bill C-63, and Bill C-18. But you still can't share news articles on Facebook.